Kenna had been standing in line for approximately 38 minutes, which was 38 minutes longer than her patients typically allowed. But here she was, anyway, waiting. Again. Because apparently, even in a state-of-the-art military facility spanning 3 cubic kilometers of engineered alloy, and humming with enough power to light up a small moon, nobody had figured out how to process new recruits efficiently. Around her, the other cadets shifted and muttered in their various languages, some melodic, some guttural, one that sounded like rocks being ground together in a cement mixer. She'd stopped trying to identify species after the first 10 minutes. There were too many, and honestly, half of them looked like someone had taken Earth's animal kingdom, hit shuffle, and added extra limbs for fun. In front of her stood something that resembled a bear that had been crossbred with a tank and then dipped in silver scales. Behind her, a creature made entirely of what looked like animated moss kept shedding particles that made her nose itch. And to her left, a being that could only be described as aggressively purple kept eyeing her with what might have been curiosity or hunger. Hard to tell when someone had 18 eyes arranged in a spiral pattern. Welcome to the Galactic Military Integration Facility, where humanity's best and brightest got to feel very, very small. The facility itself was impressive, she'd give them that. Soaring ceilings that vanished into some kind of artificial sky, walls that seemed to shift between solid and transparent depending on the angle, and floors so perfectly smooth they might as well have been liquid metal frozen mid-ripple. Everything gleamed. Everything hummed with purpose. Everything screamed, "You are out of your depth, tiny human," which was probably the point. Kenna adjusted the collar of her standard-issue jumpsuit, gray, form-fitting, and apparently designed by someone who had never met a human with actual curves, and tried not to think about how she'd ended up here. That was a long story involving too many recruiters, too many promises about expanding humanity's role in galactic affairs, and one particularly persuasive lieutenant who had shown her footage of alien combat techniques that made mixed martial arts look like patty cake. So here she was, far from home, surrounded by species that could probably tear her apart without breaking a sweat. If they sweated. Did any of them sweat? Next! The bark came from ahead, where the line fed into what looked like a massive archway constructed from materials that hurt to look at directly. They seemed to exist in more dimensions than her eyes could properly process. Beyond it, she could see other recruits emerging, some looking relieved, others confused, and one who appeared to be actively weeping some kind of luminescent fluid. Great. Kenna shuffled forward as the line moved, watching as the bear tank creature ahead of her lumbered through the archway. Lights flickered. Something beeped. A holographic display materialized in the air, showing readings that meant absolutely nothing to her. And then a voice announced in flat mechanical tones, "Threat assessment, moderate. Combat potential, high. Proceed to Bay 12. The creature grunted satisfaction and stomped off. Next! She stepped forward. Up close, the archway was even more disorienting. Energy rippled across its surface like oil on water, and she could feel something radiating from it. Not heat exactly, but a kind of pressure that made her teeth ache. Bioscanner, the orientation packet had called it. Advanced technology that could analyze a being's physical capabilities, threat level, combat potential, and approximately 6 dozen other metrics in the time it took to walk through. Kenna took a breath and stepped into the archway. Immediately, her skin prickled. It felt like being watched by 1,000 invisible eyes all at once, each one cataloging every muscle, every bone, every cell. Lights danced across her vision. Diagnostic beams, she assumed, mapping her biology in real time. For 3 seconds, maybe 4, She stood frozen in that tunnel of sensation. Then something changed. A sound erupted from the machinery, not the polite beep that had accompanied every other recruit, but a sharp, ascending tone that reminded her uncomfortably of a smoke alarm. Red lights began strobing. The holographic display that materialized wasn't calm and orderly like the others. It was flickering, refreshing, recalculating. And then, in letters large enough for everyone in the vicinity to see clearly, "Anomaly detected." Potentially lethal silence crashed down like a physical weight. Every head, and several appendages that served similar purposes, turned toward her. The mechanical voice that had been blandly announcing assessments all morning seemed to hesitate, processing, before repeating, "Anomaly detected. Potentially lethal. Manual assessment required." Kenna stood very still, trying to project calm confidence while internally wondering if she should be flattered or terrified. Potentially lethal? Her? She was 5'6" and had once cried during a particularly sad commercial about rescue dogs. "Well," she said to no one in particular, "that's new." From somewhere beyond the archway, she heard movement. Heavy, purposeful, accompanied by a clicking sound that made her think of insect legs on tile. Then he emerged, and Kenna had to actively suppress the urge to take a step back. Instructor Molkesh was imposing. That was the polite word. The honest word was nightmare fuel. He stood nearly 8 feet tall on 4 primary legs, with 2 additional limbs that might have been arms or might have been specialized weapons. Honestly, the line was blurry. His body was covered in segmented chitin that gleamed like polished obsidian, and his head was dominated by compound eyes that reflected the facility's lights in 1,000 tiny facets. When he moved, it was with the kind of predatory grace that suggested he could go from standing still to extremely violent in the span of a heartbeat. His compound eyes fixed on her, fixed on the display, fixed back on her. "Human," he said, and his voice was like gravel being crushed in a vise. Not because of any language barrier, the translator implant she'd received was working fine, but because that was just what he sounded like. "Explain this." Kenna blinked. "Explain? The machine's readout?" "Sir, I just walked through." "I don't—" "The scanner," Molkesh interrupted, clicking closer, "has been operational for 600 cycles. It has processed recruits from 4,000 species. It does not malfunction." He leaned down, bringing that alien face uncomfortably close to hers. "So either you are carrying concealed weaponry that our security failed to detect, or—" He trailed off, compound eyes scanning her up and down in a way that made her feel like a bug under a microscope, which was ironic, given his appearance. "Or the machine is broken," he finished, straightening up, "which, as I said, does not happen." Around them, the other recruits were watching with undisguised interest. Some looked amused. Others looked curious. The purple one with 18 eyes seemed to be taking notes. Kenna kept her expression neutral. "I don't have any weapons, sir. You can scan me again if—" "No need," Molkesh said, waving a limb dismissively. "We will conduct a manual assessment, standard procedure for anomalies." Something in his tone suggested this was anything but standard. "Follow me." He turned and began walking, or whatever his form of locomotion was called, toward a side door she hadn't noticed before. Kenna glanced back at the line of recruits, who were all very carefully not making eye contact with her now, and followed. They passed through corridors that twisted and turned in ways that seemed deliberately confusing, moving deeper into the facility. Other instructors and staff gave them a wide berth, though she caught several curious glances. Mulkesh didn't speak, just kept up that relentless clicking pace that forced her to almost jog to keep up. Finally, they emerged into a massive chamber that could only be described as a training hall on steroids. The space was easily the size of a football field, with a ceiling so high it created its own weather system. She could see what looked like a small cloud formation near the top. Equipment lined the walls, weapons racks, training dummies that looked like they'd been through multiple wars, and machines whose purposes she couldn't even begin to guess. And in the center of it all, a group of beings that made Mulkesh look almost welcoming. "Instructors," Mulkesh announced, his voice echoing. "We have an anomaly." 5 heads turned. Well, 4 heads and one collection of sensory organs that might have been a head. Again, the line was blurry with some of these species. A massive, reptilian creature, easily 10 feet tall and built like a walking fortress, let out a sound halfway between a laugh and a hiss. "Another broken scanner?" "That," said Mulkesh tightly, "is what we are here to determine." He gestured toward Kenna with one limb. "Human recruit. Flagged as potentially lethal. I propose a manual combat assessment." Several of the instructors made sounds that might have been amusement. One, a being that looked like living crystal, arranged in a vaguely humanoid shape, literally chimed with what had to be laughter. "A human," the crystalline instructor said, voice like bells. "Mulkesh, your scanner is definitely malfunctioning." "Which is why," Mulkesh replied, through what sounded like clenched mandibles, "we will test her manually, to confirm the error." Kenna raised her hand slightly. "Just to clarify, when you say manual combat assessment, you mean—" "I mean," Mulkesh said, turning those compound eyes back on her, "that I will test your reflexes, combat awareness, and threat response personally. It is a standard evaluation. Nothing to concern yourself with." Everything about his tone suggested it was absolutely something to concern herself with. "Right," Kenna said slowly. "And this is safe?" "Perfectly," Mulkesh said, and somehow made the word sound ominous. "I am a professional. The test is simple. I execute a controlled strike. You attempt to evade or defend. It measures reaction time, spatial awareness, and combat instinct." He began moving into what looked like a ready stance. "Most recruits fail, but that is acceptable. Failure provides valuable data." Most recruits fail. That was comforting. Kenna looked around at the other instructors, who were now watching with open interest. The reptilian one had actually sat down, settling onto his haunches like he was getting ready for a show. Next to him, another recruit, she hadn't noticed them before, was staring with wide golden eyes. Reptilian species, maybe, but smaller, less armored. He looked young and absolutely terrified on her behalf. "Don't worry," the young reptilian whispered, loud enough for her to hear. "He usually pulls the strike at the last second. Usually." "Usually," Kenna repeated flatly. "Ukthor," Mulkesh snapped at the young recruit. "Silence." So that was Ukthor. Good to know. Mulkesh began to circle her slowly, clicking, those compound eyes never blinking, because they probably couldn't. "Take a ready stance, human. Any stance you prefer. I will strike when I deem you prepared." Kenna shifted her weight, settling into a balanced position she'd learned years ago. Nothing fancy, just basic biomechanics, knees slightly bent, weight on the balls of her feet, ready to move in any direction. "Prepared," she said. Mulkesh continued circling for another few seconds, and she realized with creeping dread that this was part of the test. The anticipation, the psychological pressure. He was measuring how she handled the weight, The threat. He struck. It happened faster than thought, faster than most beings could process. Molkesh's limb whipped forward like a pneumatic piston, aimed at her shoulder with enough force to send most recruits sprawling, designed to overwhelm, to intimidate, to establish dominance. Kenna's hand snapped up and caught his wrist mid-strike. The impact made a sound like a gunshot in the cavernous space, flesh meeting chitin with enough force that several instructors actually flinched. But Kenna didn't move, didn't stumble, just stood there, fingers locked around Molkesh's limb, holding it motionless in the air between them. For approximately 2 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Well, the ones who breathed anyway. Molkesh's compound eyes widened. She hadn't known they could do that. And he pulled back. Or tried to. Kenna's grip held firm. And for one beautiful, terrible moment, the 8-foot insectoid instructor struggled against a human woman half his size. Then Kenna released him, stepped back smoothly, and returned to attention position. "Test complete, sir?" she asked, voice perfectly level. The silence in the training hall was so absolute she could hear her own heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. Calm. Steady. Not even elevated. Molkesh stared at his own limb like it had betrayed him. There were visible pressure marks where her fingers had been, indentations in the chitin that shouldn't have been possible without specialized tools. He flexed the limb experimentally, and she caught the slightest wince. "What?" he started, then stopped, started again. "What are you?" "Human, sir," Kenna replied, channeling every ounce of deadpan delivery she possessed. "As indicated on my registration forms. Page 1, Section 3, subsection." "I can read," Molkesh snapped, but there was something in his voice now. Not anger, uncertainty, maybe even the tiniest edge of fear. "Ukthor, come here." The young reptilian cadet scrambled to his feet and approached, looking between Kenna and Molkesh with obvious confusion. Up close, he was still massive, probably 200 pounds heavier than her, with scales that looked like they could deflect small arms fire. "Spar with the human," Molkesh ordered. "Standard engagement. First to submit." Ukthor's golden eyes went wide. "Sir, I don't want to hurt." "You won't," Molkesh said. And she wasn't sure if he was reassuring Ukthor or warning him. "Begin." Ukthor turned to face her, dropping into what was clearly a trained combat stance. His species was built for power. She could see it in the coiled muscle, the low center of gravity, the way his tail balanced his massive upper body. "Sorry about this," he muttered. "Don't be," Kenna said, settling into her own stance. "Just don't hold back too much, okay? Makes it awkward for both of us." He lunged. Fast for his size, really. Credit where it was due. But fast for a reptilian species that evolved in standard gravity was still telegraphed to someone who'd grown up in 1.6 Gs on a mining colony where a fall meant death. She saw the lunge coming before he'd finished committing to it, sidestepped, and used his own momentum to guide him past her. Ukthor stumbled, caught himself, spun back around. His expression was no longer apologetic. Now he looked focused, competitive. Good. He came in again, this time with a combination: claw strike, tail sweep, shoulder check. Decent technique, actually. She blocked the claw, hopped the tail sweep, and when his shoulder came in for the check, she caught his arm and used basic leverage to redirect all that mass straight into the training mat. Ukthor hit the ground with a thud that echoed, and before he could recover, Kenna had his arm locked at an angle that reptilian joints definitely weren't meant to bend. "Yield?" she asked pleasantly. "Yield," he yelped, tapping the mat frantically with his free hand. "Yield," Yield! What in the burning moons? She bent my arm in a direction it's not supposed to go. Kenna released him immediately and offered a hand up. Ukthor took it, staring at her like she'd just grown a second head. "Where did you learn that?" he demanded. "Which part?" "All of it," Kenna shrugged. Community Center back home offered classes, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6 to 8 p.m. Instructor was this retired Marine who'd done 3 tours on high-gravity worlds. Good teacher. Made us drill until muscle memory took over. She paused. Also, my older brother was kind of a jerk growing up, so I learned early how to deal with people bigger than me. The crystalline instructor, Plix, according to the name badge that materialized in Kenna's enhanced vision, chimed forward. "Molkesh, perhaps we should run the full battery of assessments. This is unusual." Molkesh was pulling up something on a holographic interface that had materialized at his gesture. Kenna's personnel file, she realized, complete with identification photo that made her look vaguely concussed and about 16 years old. "Born on Outpost Threshold," he read aloud. "High-gravity mining colony. 1.6 standard Gs. Worked in emergency response operations, age 16 to 22. Specialization in," he paused, compound eyes scanning, "civilian restraint during crisis situations." "People panic in emergencies," Kenna explained, since everyone was now staring at her. Part of the job was keeping them from hurting themselves or others until medical arrived, which meant being able to restrain someone twice my size who was actively fighting me while experiencing a trauma response. She kept her tone conversational. "Did that for 6 years. You get pretty good at leverage after the first 100 or so incidents." "First 100, Ukthor repeated weakly. "Give or take." Molkesh's mandibles clicked together in what might have been agitation. "Endurance assessment. Now." Plix set up the track. "Molkesh," Plix chimed. "Perhaps we should—" "Now." Over the next hour, Kenna ran the course, and ran it again. Standard Endurance Assessment, Molkesh had called it. A 10-kilometer circuit through variable terrain with obstacles designed to test stamina across multiple species' physiologies. Most species, she learned, operated on burst performance. Sprint hard, rest, sprint again. Made sense. Ambush predators, territorial defenders, species that evolved around conserving energy for crucial moments. The course was designed with rest stations every 2 kilometers. Kenna hit the first rest station at the 6-minute mark and kept running. "Recruit!" Molkesh's voice barked through the facility's audio system. "The rest station is mandatory. 10 minutes minimum." "I'm fine, sir," Kenna called back, vaulting a barrier that had been designed to require climbing. "Not tired yet." She wasn't lying. Oh, her heart rate was elevated, maybe 130, 140. And she'd worked up a decent sweat. But tired? Not even close. Years of running in high gravity had made this feel like jogging through a pleasant dream. At the 20-kilometer mark, she'd lapped the course twice, the monitoring staff started panicking. She could see them through the observation windows, clustered around displays showing her vital signs, gesturing frantically at each other. "Her cardiovascular system is still operating at optimal levels," someone was saying, voice carrying through a partly open door. "Lactate threshold hasn't even been approached. This doesn't make sense." "Should we stop her?" another voice asked. "On what grounds? She hasn't hit failure parameters." At 30 kilometers, Molkesh himself appeared trackside, holding up a limb. Kenna jogged to a stop. Finally, her lungs were starting to burn a little, and waited. "Explain," he said simply. "Explain." "What, sir?" "How you are still functional." Kenna took a breath, blew it out slowly. Humans are endurance hunters, sir. We're not the fastest or strongest, but we don't stop. Our ancestors literally chased prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. We've got efficient cooling systems, she gestured at the sweat soaking her jumpsuit, and cardiovascular capacity that prioritizes sustained output over burst performance. This, she waved at the track, this is maybe 60% of what I can maintain for several hours. Mulkesh looked at her, looked at the track, looked back at her. Several hours, he repeated. Yes, sir. You can maintain this pace for several hours. Well, not this exact pace. I'd need to drop it maybe 20% for anything past 3 hours. Hydration becomes an issue. But yeah, basically. Something in Mulkesh's posture changed. Not defeat exactly, more like recalculation. Come with me, he said quietly. There is something I need to confirm. They entered a different section of the facility. Medical wing, judging by the sterile smell and the number of beings in white uniforms moving between rooms. Mulkesh led her to a chamber lined with equipment that looked both sophisticated and vaguely threatening, which seemed to be the aesthetic standard around here. Pain tolerance assessment, he announced, gesturing to a chair that had too many restraints for comfort. Standard neural stimulation protocol measures mental fortitude under duress. Kenna eyed the chair. Do I want to know what neural stimulation means? It creates the sensation of pain without physical damage, a new voice said. A being that resembled a cross between a jellyfish and a chandelier floated into view, tendrils drifting. I am Dr. Limresh. I oversee medical evaluations. The process is completely safe. We simply need to map your pain response thresholds. Right, Kenna said slowly. And this is necessary because, Mulkesh said, every species has biological limiters. Pain responses that force shutdown before critical damage occurs. It is a survival mechanism. We need to understand yours. She settled into the chair. Restraints were fastened. She didn't love that part. And Dr. Limresh attached what looked like metallic contacts to her temples and neck. We will begin at level 1 and increase gradually, the doctor explained, tendrils dancing across a holographic control interface. Signal me immediately if the sensation becomes unbearable. Got it, Kenna said, then added, out of curiosity, what's the average stopping point? Most species terminate between levels 6 and 8, Limresh replied. The scale goes to 15, but we have never needed to exceed level 10. Never? The theoretical levels above 10 exist only for species with redundant nervous systems or crystalline neural structures. Organic beings simply cannot. The doctor paused. Beginning now. Level 1. A tingle ran through her nervous system. Uncomfortable, but barely, like static electricity. Level 2. Sharper now. Definite pain, but manageable. She'd had worse from touching a hot stove. 3. Now it actually hurt. Her jaw tightened involuntarily. Breathing became something she had to focus on. 4. Okay, that was unpleasant. Her hands gripped the chair arms, but she'd broken her collarbone in a climbing accident when she was 19. This was bad, but it wasn't that. 5. Her vision blurred slightly. Pain radiated through her entire body now. Not localized, just this overwhelming sensation of wrong. She heard someone make a sound and realized it was her. A hiss through clenched teeth. 6. Everything was pain. White-hot and all-consuming. Her back arched involuntarily. Distantly, she heard alarms. Her neural activity is... This is extraordinary, Limresh was saying. Mulkesh, she is still conscious. Fully conscious. Level 7, Mulkesh said. Sir, I really don't think... 7. The world turned inside out. Pain wasn't even the right word anymore. This was something beyond language, beyond thought. Every nerve was screaming. Her muscles locked up. She couldn't breathe properly. But she could still think. That was the thing. Through all of it, some part of her brain was still working, still processing, still aware, cataloging the sensation, analyzing it, recognizing it as simulated, not real damage. And that recognition created just enough distance to function. Subject is maintaining consciousness, someone said, voice distant. Cognitive function appears intact. This should not be possible. The pain vanished. Kenna gasped, sucking in air, her entire body trembling. Sweat poured down her face. Her heart was hammering at probably 180, maybe 190, but she was still here, still aware. Dr. Limresh floated closer, tendrils quivering. "How do you feel?" "Like I just had a religious experience," Kenna managed. "And not the good kind." She swallowed hard. "Is it supposed to hurt? I mean, obviously it's supposed to hurt, but is it supposed to stop me from functioning?" The silence that followed was profound. Mulkesh approached slowly. Most species lose consciousness at level 5. Their biology forces shut down to prevent psychological trauma. You remained aware through level 7. He paused. "What kind of world produces this?" Kenna laughed. Slightly hysterical, maybe, but genuine. "Earth. Regular Earth. Doctor, what you just did, humans pay money to experience similar things voluntarily. We call them extreme sports. We jump off cliffs with fabric straps tied to our ankles. We fight each other in cages for entertainment. We literally invented dozens of ways to inflict controlled pain on ourselves because we find it stimulating." "That is insane," Ukthor said from the doorway. She hadn't noticed him following them. "Yeah," Kenna agreed. "Probably. But it's also effective. We're adaptable because we refuse to accept limitations, including the ones our own biology tries to impose." Mulkesh turned to Limresh. "Pull up Earth's cultural database, combat sports section." What followed was 20 minutes of the medical staff watching footage that Kenna had grown up considering normal. Boxing, mixed martial arts, wrestling. Footage of humans repeatedly hitting each other, getting back up, continuing until someone physically couldn't anymore. "They do this for recreation," Plix chimed, having appeared at some point. "Not survival, not territory, entertainment." "And training," Kenna added. "Technique refinement, physical conditioning. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years. Developed entire systems of combat, passed them down, improved them. When you spend that long learning how to hurt your own species efficiently, you get pretty good at understanding biomechanics." Mulkesh was very quiet now. Then, "Tactical theory class. Immediately. I want Instructor Pixlath present." They relocated again, this time to something resembling a lecture hall, though the seats were designed for wildly different body types, and the holographic displays floated at various heights. Instructor Pixlath turned out to be an ethereal being composed mostly of flowing energy contained in a roughly humanoid shape, with tendrils that constantly wrote equations in the air around them. "Mulkesh," Pixlath said, voice like wind through crystals, "I was in the middle of—" "This is more important." He gestured at Kenna. "Human recruit. I need you to assess." Other recruits were filing in. Apparently, this was a scheduled class. Ukthor took a seat near the front, still watching Kenna with something between awe and concern. More cadets followed, the moss being from earlier, several species she didn't recognize, and one that looked like an ambulatory geometric theorem. Pixlath began their lecture on interspecies warfare dynamics, discussing biological advantages, exploiting weaknesses, tactical considerations. About 15 minutes in, they brought up a comparison chart. "Humans," Pixlath said dismissively, gesturing at an entry near the bottom, "present minimal threat in direct combat scenarios. Fragile skeletal structure, poor natural armor, limited sensory range compared to most species. Recommended strategy: maintain distance, exploit superior reach or natural weaponry." Kenna raised her hand. Pixlath's energy tendrils flickered with what might have been surprise. "Yes? Permission to offer a correction, sir? This is established tactical doctrine, recruit, based on centuries of—" "I understand, sir, but it's incomplete. And if we're going to be fighting alongside each other, probably better if everyone has accurate information about what humans can actually do." Molkesh, standing at the back of the room, made a gesture she couldn't interpret. Pixlath rippled uncertainly. "Very well," the instructor said. "Enlighten us." Kenna stood, moved to the front of the room. Every eye and equivalent sensory organ tracked her movement. "Humans are pursuit predators," she began. "We don't ambush. We don't rely on natural weapons or armor. We chase, and we don't stop chasing until our prey collapses from exhaustion. Our ancestors hunted animals faster and stronger than us by literally following them until they couldn't run anymore. Sometimes for days." She brought up Earth's data on the holographic interface. Thankfully, the controls were intuitive enough. "We have persistence, but we also have adaptation." Images flashed up, tools, weapons, technology. "We're not strong, so we invented leverage. We're not fast, so we invented projectiles." Every limitation became a problem to solve. And we've been solving those problems for roughly 200,000 years. The room was silent now. "Pack tactics," she continued. "Humans bond with other species, not just our own kind. We'll form emotional attachments to almost anything and then die protecting it. Your tactical doctrine mentions maintaining distance from humans?" She smiled without humor. "That works until we close the gap. And we will close the gap, because stopping isn't really in our vocabulary." Pixlath's energy form was pulsing irregularly. "You are suggesting humans are more dangerous than assessed?" "I'm suggesting humans are different than assessed. We're not the biggest threat in a straight fight, but we're the threat that doesn't quit. Ever. We'll lose 100 battles and come back for the 101st. We'll get knocked down and get back up. We'll take damage that should stop us and keep moving anyway, because our biology gave us the option to ignore pain if we decide the goal is worth it." She looked around the room, meeting various eyes and eye equivalents. "And here's the thing nobody seems to have mentioned yet. Everything I just described? That's normal for humans. I'm not special. I'm not enhanced. I'm just a standard human who grew up in slightly higher gravity and had a job that required physical competence. There are billions like me, better than me, stronger, faster, more skilled." Ukthor made a sound like a deflating balloon. "The scanner called me potentially lethal," Kenna said quietly. "It wasn't malfunctioning. It just recognized something the rest of you haven't yet. Humans are persistence predators with pattern recognition, tool use, and a cultural tendency to turn every limitation into a training exercise. We don't have natural weapons, so we made them. We don't have armor, so we invented tactics that don't require it. And we pack bond so aggressively that we'll adopt alien species as found family and protect them accordingly." She returned to her seat. The lecture hall remained silent for approximately 10 seconds. Kenna counted, before Pixlath's energy form flickered through several colors she didn't have names for. "Molkesh," the instructor said carefully, Perhaps we should revisit the threat assessment protocols for Earth-origin species. Perhaps, Mulkesh agreed, and there was something in his voice now. Respect, maybe, or wariness. Possibly both. Ukthor raised a massive claw. Question: if humans are this capable, why haven't we seen more of them in combat roles? Good question, actually. Kenna glanced at Mulkesh, who made a gesture that seemed to mean, your floor. She stood again. Because until recently, Earth wasn't interested in playing soldier for the galactic community, she said bluntly. We were offered support roles: medical, engineering, logistics. Someone decided humans were too fragile for front-line work, and rather than argue, Earth just went along with it. Built reputation as the helpful species, the ones who fix things and keep supply lines running. But, Pixelath prompted, but that's changing. Earth is tired of being underestimated, tired of being patted on the head and told to stay in the safe zones. She let that hang in the air. So, when this facility opened, when the galactic military started accepting recruits from member species for integrated training, Earth sent candidates. Didn't make a big announcement. Didn't ask permission. Just sent people who met the qualifications. You, Mulkesh said. Me, Kenna confirmed. And about 24 others in this intake cycle. We're not asking for special treatment. We're just here to prove we can do the job. Ukthor looked like he was having some kind of existential crisis. How many humans are there? Total? Last census? Around 12 billion. The geometric theorem being made a sound like shattering glass. 12 billion persistence predators with tool use capabilities and pack-bonding instincts? Give or take. More silence. Then Pixelath dismissed the class with a distracted wave of energy tendrils, and the recruits filed out, all of them giving Kenna significantly more space than they had that morning. Mulkesh approached once the room had cleared. Walk with me. They left the lecture hall, moving through corridors that Kenna was starting to recognize now. Late afternoon light, simulated, probably, filtered through the transparent sections of wall. Mulkesh's clicking steps echoed, but he moved slower now, almost contemplative. I owe you an apology, he said finally. That surprised her. Sir? I assumed malfunction, assumed weakness. Humans have been underestimated by the galactic community for decades. I participated in that underestimation. His compound eyes fixed on her. You knew this would happen. It wasn't a question. Kenna considered lying, decided against it. I knew the scanner would flag something unusual. Humans register differently than most species on threat assessment matrices. Our physical capabilities don't match our psychology. We should be cautious, risk-averse, given how fragile we are. But we're not. That creates anomalies in predictive models. You were sent here deliberately to demonstrate this. I was sent here to succeed in training, Kenna corrected. The demonstration was inevitable, given how these assessments work. But it wasn't the goal. The goal is proving humans can perform at the same level as any other species in combat roles. They reached an observation deck overlooking the main training grounds. Below, hundreds of recruits were running drills, sparring, operating equipment. A dozen species, maybe more, working together in organized chaos. Earth's military command knew exactly what would happen when I walked through that scanner, Kenna admitted quietly. They knew someone would test me, knew I'd have to prove myself. And they knew that once I did, it would change how people here think about humans. You are not the only human in this facility, Mulkesh said. No, sir. And the others are equally capable? Kenna smiled. Some are better. There's a woman named Tully in another training cohort who did competitive climbing for 8 years. Makes me look slow. And a man called Iko, who was competitive heavyweight champion in mixed martial arts for 5 consecutive years. I'm good, sir, but I'm not exceptional by human standards. Mulkesh's mandibles clicked, together repeatedly. Agitation. She'd learned to recognize. 12 billion, he muttered. 12 billion of you. Earth isn't a threat to the galactic community, Kenna said. We don't want conquest or dominance. We just want to be treated as equals, respected as capable, given opportunities to serve in roles that match our actual abilities, not assumptions about our limitations. And if you are not given these opportunities, then we'll keep proving ourselves until the assumptions change. Humans are persistent, remember? It's kind of our thing. He turned to face her fully. I have been an instructor here for 23 cycles, trained recruits from hundreds of species. I have never seen anyone catch a strike the way you did. Never seen endurance like yours. Never encountered pain tolerance at those levels in an unmodified organic being. I'm not special, Kenna repeated. I'm just human. That, Mulkesh said, is precisely what concerns me. He paused. And impresses me, both, simultaneously. Over the next few weeks, word spread. Quietly at first, then less so. The human who caught Mulkesh's strike, the human who ran 30 kilometers without stopping, the human who smiled through pain that should have rendered her unconscious. Other instructors started paying attention to the human recruits, started actually testing them rather than assuming limitations, started discovering that everything Kenna had said was accurate. Humans were different, dangerous in unexpected ways, capable of things that defied conventional threat assessment. Ukthor became something like a friend. He'd approach her in the dining facility, settle his massive frame across from her, and ask questions. Not aggressive questions, curious ones. Is it true humans can survive in temperature ranges that would kill most species? Within reason, yeah. We're adaptable. And you really bond with other species? Like, emotionally? Ukthor, I've been here 3 weeks, and I already consider you a friend. So yes. His golden eyes would widen every time, like he couldn't quite believe it. Plix started sitting in on her training sessions, chiming observations, taking notes. Fascinating, they'd murmur. Absolutely fascinating. Your species should not work, and yet you dominate your planet. We cooperate, Kenna would reply. Makes up for a lot of individual weaknesses. 6 weeks into training, she walked into the main hall and found Mulkesh waiting with what looked like formal documentation. Recruit Kenna, he said, compound eyes unreadable. You have completed preliminary assessments ahead of schedule. Combat proficiency, exceptional. Endurance metrics, beyond standard parameters. Tactical acumen, high. Pain tolerance, unprecedented. She waited. You are hereby advanced to specialized training cohorts, effective immediately. He extended the documentation, digital, hovering between them. Congratulations, Kenna took it, scanned the contents. Instructor. Recommendations, performance metrics. A note at the bottom from Mulkesh himself. Subject has exceeded all expectations. Recommend full integration into advanced combat units. Human species requires comprehensive reassessment for military roles. She looked up. Thank you, sir. Do not thank me yet. Advanced training is significantly more difficult. Something in his posture shifted, almost playful. Though I suspect you will find ways to manage. Persistence, sir. It's kind of your thing. Yes, you have mentioned. He clicked away, then paused. Kenna, that day, with the scanner, you could have corrected my assumptions immediately. Told me about human capabilities. Instead, you let me test you. Would you have believed me if I'd just told you? No. Then the test was necessary. Mulkesh made a sound that might have been laughter. 12 billion of you, he muttered again and walked away. That evening, Kenna stood on the observation deck, watching stars that weren't Sol, thinking about home, about the people who'd sent her here knowing exactly what would happen, about the message this whole situation was sending. Earth wasn't asking for permission anymore, wasn't waiting to be invited. Humans were here, capable and ready, and the galaxy was going to have to adjust its assumptions accordingly. Her communicator chimed. Message from home. Her brother. Heard you caught an instructor's strike on your first day. Mom wants to know if you're eating enough. I want to know if you made him cry. She smiled, typed back. No tears yet. But I've got time. Persistence, remember? Below, the training grounds glowed with activity. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy, learning to work together, fight together. And among them, scattered throughout, more humans, quiet, unassuming, potentially lethal. Earth had arrived, and they weren't going anywhere. 3 months later, graduation ceremony. Kenna stood in formation with her unit, Ukthor on her left, Plix chiming softly on her right, 43 other recruits behind them, representing 18 species. The ceremony hall stretched upward into artificial sky, filled with dignitaries, officials, families who'd traveled across star systems to witness this moment. Mulkesh approached the podium, his chitin polished to mirror brightness. This cohort, he began, voice carrying through translation matrices, has exceeded expectations in ways that have forced us to reconsider established doctrine. Particularly regarding one species. Kenna kept her eyes forward, but she could feel attention shifting toward the human contingent. I begin this ceremony with an admission. I was wrong. Earth's citizens are not support personnel. They are not fragile. They are not limited to auxiliary roles. He paused. They are warriors. Unconventional, unpredictable, and more dangerous than assessment protocols indicated. Ukthor whispered, He's never admitted being wrong before. Ever. Recruit Kenna, Mulkesh, called. Front and center. She marched forward, movements crisp. Top honors, combat excellence, endurance beyond measurement. You have changed how this facility evaluates an entire species. He extended a commendation badge that floated between them. Well done. Thank you, sir. As she returned to formation, she caught sight of the other humans in the audience, observers, future recruits, military liaisons from Earth. They were all smiling, not gloating, just satisfied. Because Kenna wasn't the exception, she was the example. The opening move in a conversation Earth had been waiting decades to have. They hadn't asked permission, hadn't begged for recognition, just showed up, performed, and let results speak. Mulkesh concluded the ceremony with traditional words, but Kenna was thinking about what came next. Advanced assignments, real missions, humanity proving itself again and again until potentially lethal became simply expected. The scanner had been right all along. It just hadn't known how right.